Hey now, today we are taking a look at a very mathematical game, and that is Adventure Time Card Wars from Cryptozoic Entertainment. Now this is the Finn versus Jake Collector's Pack. There's also a BMO versus Lady Rainicorn expansion pack, or Collector's Pack. The game mechanics are exactly the same for both. They're just different types of cards. Consider them to be two different starter decks, like if you're playing Magic or whatnot. So my review of this will pretty much cover both of them because they're essentially the same game. And let me give a full disclaimer here is that I love Adventure Time. I've loved it since right after the first season, marathoned all the episodes, which isn't tough to do since it's a 12 to 15 minute show. I just love the world, love the characters, love the quirky humor. The creator of the show, Pendleton Ward, was very heavily influenced by his experiences with D&D and other tabletop role-playing games and fantasy worlds, and it definitely shows, and I just love every bit of that show. Now, Cryptozoic Entertainment has sort of made a name for themselves in having these licensed games. DC Comics, all their other deck builders, Penny Arcade, Lord of the Rings, the upcoming Street Fighter and Naruto deck builders. So this is nothing new. I mean, they license a lot of different games. Some of them have been better than others. So, you know, I was a bit wary going into this. I love Adventure Time, but it doesn't necessarily mean that every game or product based off Adventure Time is going to be a good quality product. This one was helped along by the fact that it's actually based particularly on an episode of Adventure Time where Finn and Jake played a fictitious game called Card Wars, which was basically a parody of Magic the Gathering. Very funny episode, and that's where this inspiration came from. And yes, you do get to floop the pig in this game. So, but again, none of this really is a guarantee that this is going to be a good quality game. So let's go ahead and do a brief overview of the game and its different mechanics. Then we'll come back and I'll tell you what I think. Alright, just a brief overview of Adventure Time Card Wars, the Finn versus Jake Collector's Pack, or Starter Deck, however you want to say it. And actually, I could probably do a full tutorial of the game instead of an overview because it's very, very simple. Now, this is based off of an episode of Adventure Time where they're playing a Magic the Gathering type game, and the goal is the same as in Magic the Gathering. You're trying to knock out your opponent's life points. In this case, you start with 25 life points, each of you. You have these little hit point counters over here, which are double-sided, which I hate, 1s and 3s, which will be used to keep track of your own damage, but also to keep track of the damage of your creatures that you put out here. Now each deck is, you have the Blue Plains deck and the Cornfield deck, and you each have a deck of cards, but you also have a set of 4 land tiles that correspond to that deck, and you will set them up just like you see here because the game takes place in lanes. So what happens in one lane is going to affect your opponent's opposite land card as well. So that's how everything's going to go in straight lanes. What's very important is that some card effects will actually force you to flip over the land cards, which can be important. You can still play cards on those lands, but some cards are very dependent on the number of a particular type of land you have in play, and most cards in your deck are going to be keyed to either the Blue Plains or the Cornfield, and if you do not have at least 2 of those lands face up in play, you are not able to play that card. Now, at the start of the game, you'll each draw 5 cards. At the start of each of the subsequent turns, you'll just draw 1 card, and I believe, as the rules say, it's a little murky, but you can't draw above 5 cards. Now, one of the most important types of cards in your deck are the creatures. You have 2 action points to spend on your turn. You can use them to summon creatures, summon spells. You can even use points to draw cards from the deck if you just want more cards, and you can mix and match those 2 things. But here's an example of a creature, Struzan Jin. Here's the type of land that he's keyed to. Here's how many action points he takes to get into play, so it takes both of your points. The type of creature, his special ability, so he gets +2 attack for each flooped creature you control. In this game, flooped is the same as tapped or exhausted, so any creature that has been exhausted to use its ability is considered to be flooped. Down in the bottom left corner is their attack value, and then the bottom right corner is their defense value, and I would be able to place that in a lane. If I'm ever attacking with a creature, I would put it in the front. If it's flooped, I'll put it back here to indicate that that's only there for defense. Unlike in Magic, a flooped creature can still defend during the attack phase, but we'll get back to that in a moment. I also have spell cards, and this is an example of a rainbow spell, so it's not connected to any type of land. It costs me 0 action points, and I'm able to move one of my creatures to one of my empty lanes. So very, very simple. And even if I've used some of my action points, I can still use these cards until I move on to the next phase. Another example of a spell, this one is keyed to Blue Plains, and it does take 1 action point. Gnome Snot, very lovely. You get to draw 3 cards. And then you have buildings. Now, buildings are actually played off the board, but you'll put them next to one of your particular land cards. So whatever the effect is, unless it's a global effect, it only affects that type of land, unless you use another card like special ability to move it around. In this case, the wood mobile home takes an action point. You can floop it to move a creature in an adjacent lane to this lane if empty. Another example, the schoolhouse, you can floop it. Your creature in this lane loses all abilities and gains the floop ability of a random creature with a floop ability in your discard pile, which is pretty interesting. And that's basically that. Now, of course, the Khorne deck has its own types of creatures and monsters. You have the Field Stalker. At the start of each turn, the player draws a card. You have the Blood Fortress. Your creature in this lane has +1 attack. The Khorne Lord. Khorne Lord has +1 attack for each other cornfield creature you control. You have the Cornator. When Cornator enters play, deal 1 damage to your opponent for each cornfield landscape you control. So obviously these are all key to your particular type of land and get more powerful for having that type of land and other types of those land creatures in play. Now, after you've get done playing cards on your turn, you go into a mandatory fight phase. And what this basically is, and here I'll show you some of the other blue creatures. We have like the Nice Ice Baby, we'll say that he's out, and the Wodic Minotaur. During the attack phase, let's just play out some random creatures here to get this set up. Here we go. During the attack phase, every creature that you have must attack if it is able to do so. If it's flooped, it can't attack. If it doesn't actually have an attack value for whatever reason or is subject to some kind of special spell, then it can't attack, then so be it. It cannot attack. But if it can, then it must. So each creature is going to deal damage to each other in a lane. So the Wodic Marauder attacks the Khorne Ronin. These are great card names, by the way. And they're going to deal damage to each other. Like in Magic, it's simultaneous. There's no first strike unless a creature has a particular ability. So they'll each deal damage to each other. You'll use these little damage tokens. And they'll also use their special abilities as well. If a creature takes enough damage to meet or beat its defense, it dies. Defense is like life points, essentially. And then it goes to the discard. But even if there's no trample in this game, so the damage, any extra damage does not carry over, they have successfully defended one last time. If there is no creature in the opposing lane, the damage goes straight through to your opponent. They take that many damage to their 25 total hit points. And that's how you're going to win the game, is by knocking that number down. And well, that's it. That's essentially the game. You're playing creatures out, trying to put them in strategic spots in order to get to your opponent as easily as possible, ripping through his creatures to get to them, playing buildings and spell cards to enhance your creatures, all with the goal of trying to knock your opponent out as quickly as possible before he does the same to you. There's a couple little extra bits, but that's essentially it. Now let's go back to my final opinion. If I had to come up with a very brief description for Adventure Time Card Wars, it would be a tutorial to Magic the Gathering, because that's what I felt when I was playing this. I've played Magic for a number of years off and on, and Magic is by no means a difficult game, but there is some very complex strategies that can be had with it. There's a tremendous amount of cards, and as the years have rolled on, there's been more and more little rules compiled on. Playing Adventure Time, while some things are very different, like the concept of having the different lanes with the different land tiles and having action points instead of mana, while those things are different, they really just feel like simplified versions of the mana resource system of Magic. And the combat is very simplified. You know, everything is just sort of basic. Now, does that make it a bad game? Not necessarily, but it is really simple. I mean, to its detriment sometimes, and sometimes it's a good thing that it's that simple. I can teach this game in less than 5 minutes. I mean, anyone who has even a basic cursory experience with different types of competitive strategic card games will pick this up like that. And I think that this would make a very good introductory game for younger players who are not familiar with these types of games, or just people who don't generally play board games or card games the way that I do, and probably you, the viewer, do as well. The game has a fantastic art style if you like the art style from Adventure Time, which not everyone does. It's that weird sort of trippy, surreal, probably enjoyed by pot smokers quite a bit art style. I'm just being funny, but you know, not everyone's going to like that. Not everyone's going to like the little bits of flavor text on the cards, or the font style that they use, which is all harkening back to Adventure Time. And now, if you are an Adventure Time fan and you do like that art style, one thing I would caution you on is that there's not actually any of the characters from the show in this game. They're right there on the box. The game is influenced by that episode of the show, but you're not going to be playing with Finn or Jake or any of their friends and all the various cast members. This is strictly just artwork inspired by that world, which was still fine for me. I definitely got the feel of Adventure Time coming out of that, even if the theme is not that tightly integrated. Like I said, this is basically just putting out cards, attacking your opponent. If there's no monster there, yay, you do damage. That's it. That's really all that you're aiming for in this. I do like the action point system. I do like the fact that they're versatile, so you can use them to draw cards instead. You have different types of cards. The land system is somewhat interesting, where you have to have certain types of land out there. I didn't really, in order to bring out cards, I didn't really get the full feel of that because I didn't do any type of deck building with this. I imagine that's more important when you start mixing decks together, because then you have to have different types of land, and if someone shuts down one of your land, it's a big deal. But that didn't really come up because both sides in this game have more than enough land. It never came up where someone couldn't cast a card because they didn't have enough type of the land that they're keyed to. This just never happened. So that might be something a little more strategic that may happen in more advanced games. But I wasn't really interested in doing the deck building in this. I wanted it to be just a card game I could bust open and play. And they are going to be releasing collector's packs for this, unfortunately, booster packs essentially. They swore that they wouldn't, but now they are, that they see how popular the game has become. But I don't think it's necessary for you to do that. I think you can get the full flavor of this game by buying either of these expansion packs. I imagine that the BMO versus Lady Rainicorn one is the same thing with a different flavor to it, different land tiles and such. Basically, I think that if you really love Adventure Time and you're not that deeply entrenched into the modern board gaming hobby, you haven't played games like Summoner Wars and Mage Wars, and not deeply entrenched into the Magic the Gathering universe and other collectible card games, then this one is worth not only a try, but probably picking up for the price that it's at, because it gives you a very good, fun, light feeling of playing a strategic card game, but it's not heavy at all. It's very light, and it gives you that Adventure Time feeling. But even if you do like Adventure Time, if you are a very heavy strategic card game player, this is probably one to pass up. It's too light. It just is. I mean, it's fun to a degree, but there's not enough meat on the bones there. I think it would make a great gift for the younger gamers and people that don't play heavy games, or people that love Adventure Time. Of all the Adventure Time merchandise, this is probably at the top of the list of things I would consider picking up for anyone as a gift, or for myself. But again, it's just very light, and I don't know that it's going to stay in my collection, just because if I have this sitting next to any number of other strategic games, including like Pixel Tactics or the aforementioned Summoner Wars, I would always choose those over this. But it is Adventure Time, and you have to give it points for that. It doesn't detract from how much I love the show, and it's something to definitely try. If you walk into your friendly local game store and see this on the shelf, give it a try, because it is charming in its own way. My name is Nick, this is Board Game Brawl, and I'm reminding you to get out there and game every day and every week.